And quick reminder, if you have a question, just interrupt because I can't see everyone. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to the next pasuk. Usually in my Mishlei stream, I like to review the pasuk before, but I feel like there's kind of a tendency to get caught up in that. So if you want to review at any time, then just like feel free to message me and I'll review with you. Okay. All right. New pasuk. This is 10:2. All right. Lo yo'ilu otro. You can see the screen, I assume. Lo yo'ilu otros resha tzedakah tatzil mimaves. Okay. I say this is a famous pasuk, but I feel like it's only famous because it's towards the beginning of Mishlei and like people do it often. But let's dub this a famous pasuk. Okay. Anyone want to take a stab at translating? Any brave souls?
I could try.
Go ahead.
Okay. Even though I kind of know, but
did we do this one in class?
Yeah.
Oh, we did. So you have to not give away any secrets.
Yeah. Treasure houses of evil or wickedness will not benefit him, and righteousness will save him from death.
Okay, good. So I feel like there is a more contemporary term for treasure. Treasure house is totally fine. I was going to say treasuries. Okay, I think that's the word I was thinking. Treasuries of wickedness will not benefit. But so tzedakah you translate it as righteousness will save from death, and I think the only ambiguity here is what would be the other way to translate tzedakah? Question for anyone?
Charity.
Charity. Okay, right. So so this is going to be an ambiguity in the Mefarshim here. Okay. Unlike, I guess our last one also didn't have that many translation ambiguities here. Let me just show you the other translations really quickly. And again, I'm going to try to review as much methodology as possible here. Okay, is that I first try to translate it on my own, then I go to the minimalist Mefarshim. So in this case, it is, Sa'dya Gaon and Mitzvah is usually one of my go-to guys, but he didn't say anything here. So we got Sa'dya Gaon and we got the Targum of Ksuvim. Sa'dya Gaon says, Tzedakah, he translates as tzedek. Okay, so he translated it the way that Leah did. Okay, so he says tzedakah equals righteousness and not charity. Okay, so just take note of that. And then Targum Ksuvim says, so let's see if those of you who know some Aramaic, or even if those of you who don't know full Aramaic, see if you can spot what he adds. Okay, Loma vatrin otre derashia v'tidkasa mefatia min mosa bisha. So even if you don't know all the words, there's something that could jump out at you. Maybe.
Bisha?
Bisha, right? Anyone know what Bisha means?
Is it like embarrassment?
Good guess. It's actually, I don't think related to the Hebrew word of busha. So Bisha, anyone know what Bisha in Aramaic?
Isn't it harm?
Close. We actually had
like
it in...
Bisha?
Say again?
Like Lichna Bisha?
It could be used as harm. We actually had it in last week's parsha. Oh, sorry, 2 weeks ago. Oh, and last week's parsha also. Bish is just the Aramaic term for bad. Okay, like I was thinking of Eitzadas Tovara is Tav Ubish. Okay, but so here he's translating Maves as bad death. Okay, so whatever that means, that's the thing he's adding. Okay. Then just again surveying my go-to 3 English translations here. ArtScroll says treasuries of wickedness will not avail, but charity rescues from death. Living Knox says riches acquired through wickedness are of no avail, but charity saves from death. That's virtually the same. And the treasuries of wickedness will not avail, but righteousness saves from death. I think ours is close enough to those that we don't even really need these here. So let's just get rid of these. And then, I didn't realize I made a typo there. And let's get rid of Sa'dya Gaon. So the only real thing that we have to keep in mind here is the Targum saying bad death. Okay. So now we have our translation. That was a little bit quicker than the last time. So what are the questions and problems on the pasuk?
If we're translating
let's go with Shmuel first.
If we're translating tzedakah as righteousness, like Sa'dya Gaon,
Yeah.
then it appears that we're lacking the usual parallelism found in Mishlei.
Okay, so this is something which we touched on last time, I think, but let me just say it again because I don't think everyone was here last time. Is in Mishlei it usually goes with opposites. Okay, so and usually the closer the opposite, like you want to assume that they're the closest opposites possible. So Shmuel, you're saying if you translate it as charity, then you'd be lacking the opposites?
No, if you translate it as righteousness, you would be.
Oh, interesting. I think otherwise. Anyone think otherwise? What's the opposite of righteousness? If you translate it as righteousness, what would be the opposite in the pasuk?
That would probably be wickedness.
Wickedness.
But it's more like, I'm thinking of treasuries of wickedness, more like being miserly.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is if you translate tzedakah as general righteousness, then what exactly is the action or the quality that is being highlighted in the first half? I wouldn't say that it's like you're missing the opposite. I'd just say that we need to define it a little bit more because wickedness is close enough to charity here. To righteousness. So let's just ask the first question as a, even though this is part of the translation here, is what is tzedek or tzedakah in this context? Okay, that we're gonna have to answer no matter what, and we'll have to pick a translation. Okay, Yaakov, did you also have a question?
Yes. What is a treasury of wickedness?
What are otzros resha? Okay, good. That's another primary question. What else?
You seem to have skirted over before with the varying translations, whether otros resha was accumulated through wickedness or sort of an accumulation of wickedness.
I think that's what Yaakov's asking here. What are otros resha?
Okay, no, I guess what I'm asking a little differently is, when you viewed the three different translations, I guess, provided, it seemed like you were treating it as if there was no difference whether it was otros, either the means or the contents, so to say.
Right. So that's why I view that not as a translation question. I view that as an interpretation question. So in translating, I think it translates that way. And then now we're asking to analyze what does it mean, And if you want, we can put it that way, right? Is it referring to money that was acquired through wickedness, or is it what was the other possibility you said?
Or is it referring to acquired through wickedness, or is it wickedness itself? Right, treasuries of wickedness.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Right. Okay, or is it
it's like
it's description of
correct.
A quantity of wickedness itself. Okay, yeah, that's a legitimate question. Okay, good.
And along those lines, it's interesting that it uses the plural of otsar rather than just say otsar resha.
Yeah,
it says
that is a good question. Yeah, so I'll add that. And why does it specify otsros in the plural? Yeah. And this is what we would call a minor question, where if we can answer it, great, but if not, then we're not going to lose sleep on it. And there are mafarshim here. I don't think we had this talk last time, Ibn Ezra Malbim talk. So here's the quick little methodology thing here is that there's in my mind, there's like a spectrum of mafarshim, probably on Tanakh in general, but certainly in Mishlei. You got on the one hand, you got the Ibn Ezra, and Ibn Ezra and Metzudas David. The other hand, you've got like people like the Malbim and like Rav Hirsch. So Metzudas David and Ibn Ezra are very comfortable saying that Mishlei uses synonyms. He repeats the same thing in different words. Like the nuances are not necessarily there for being intrinsic to the idea. But then you have the diehard Hebrew theorists, the modern Hebrew theorists like Rav Hirsch and the Malbim, who say that every single nuance matters and there's no such thing as synonyms. And if it says like Navon versus Mavin, or if it says Otsar versus Otros, or if it said like in the previous one, Tuga instead of Etzev, or Ben instead of Naar, each one of these ideas is like intrinsic to the pasuk. So each approach to Mishlei is legitimate, like in the sense that you can still get good ideas out of it. But the approach we take is we note what is a minor question, and if we can answer it in line with the main idea, great, but we don't make the main idea hinge on it. So good question, we list it, but we don't loose leaf over it. Okay, what are the other questions here?
In what sense do the oats roast Russia not benefit?
Okay, good. So in what sense do the oats roast Resha not benefit? Okay, and you can split that into several questions. When you asked that, were you just asking it as a neutral thing, or you had like a problem? Was that a question or a problem?
Well, I guess you need a framework for benefit.
Okay, good. So number one is anytime you talk about benefit, you need to define the value system by which benefit is measured, right? So benefit in terms of what? That is a good neutral objective question. Anyone want to ask I have a problem with this version of the question?
I'm not sure if this is what you're getting at, but
Yeah.
the opposite on the other side is that we will be saved from death. And I'm not sure how that is necessarily a benefit when everyone.
Okay, that's interesting. That's actually a good question / step towards an answer. Okay, I'm gonna list that, even though it could be subsumed under other questions here. Okay, which is what is the relationship between the benefit not provided by the oats roast Resha and the salvation from death provided by Tzedakah? What I was asking, I mean, that's a good question, Tina, but what I was asking, yeah, you want to say?
Yeah, just like to flesh out the question.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a big benefit to treasures, even if they're of wickedness, whatever that means.
Right.
Yeah, like if let's say a person needs a very expensive surgery in order to live. So because they have these treasures of wickedness, they can spend it and get the surgery and save their life.
Right. Okay, good. Right. So I think that's the problem way to ask the question is they do benefit, like regardless. I mean, I guess if you took it in Donnie's way of that it's talking about like you've got a treasury filled with wickedness. So then maybe that doesn't benefit. But if you're talking about money, which is plain shot, then like, yeah, it could benefit. Like, in a sense, it doesn't matter how it got there, but you can use it. I mean, and we have many cases of like throughout history of Rishaim who did good things with their money. I mean, I think you can say that Herod was a big Russia, but like he built the second base of Mikdash. That seemed to be a pretty good thing, or like, you got lots of philanthropists, Jewish or not Jewish, who like you can say that they were wicked or that they got their money through wicked means, but like they did benefit with it, So the problem again is like it's a sweeping statement that makes it sound like there's no benefit whatsoever. Clearly, we need to like either define the term benefit in a way where that's true, or we need to understand like what the parameters are, okay, in order to make this an acceptable statement. And by the way, remember this is let me quickly go through a quick methodology point that I actually was going to do last time and we didn't get a chance to do, just relating to this question here. Okay, hopefully, I think I'm sharing my entire screen. So tell me if you can't see what I'm talking about. But so this is in the Ri Ibn Kaspi, who, for those who, I can't remember if we talked about him last time. Ri Ibn Kaspi is one of these new Rishonim, okay? New in the sense that like, he's been around. He was, I think, a generation after the Rambam, but most of his works were in manuscript form or in obscure form until recently, when our beautiful Al HaTorah site, made him available to the public. So he says, so he actually has two commentaries on Mishlei. Okay, I don't know why he wrote two, but they have different commentaries here. Different explanations here. So hold on. He says, V'da od ki gzeros ze hasefer stamios, okay, which I don't know if that's particular grammatical lingo, but the way I understood it is that the statements in the book are absolute. Ritzoni, meaning to say she'ein bam choma, that there's no limit, literally there's no wall. V'kasuv b'rov elu shehem kololos. Hakavana barov elu shem kolos. The intention in most of them is that they are general statements. Ki kavanaso ba'amro ben chacham So, for example, when it says ben chacham in the previous pasuk we did last time, kol ben chacham, it means every ben chacham. B'chein hakavana berubam shem efsharios meodios. So when it says something, it's saying they are highly likely. Okay. V'im be'emes yesh b'zeh sefer she'ena meodios. However, there are also in the book statements that are not highly probable. V'nachon shehem mimin ha'efshari b'shaveh. Sometimes they are equally probable as their alternative. O mimin asher al hama'at. Or sometimes they are, talking about a situation of that are unlikely, okay, that they're on the minority. Some of them, he explicitly states this, yesh, okay, kamo yesh mis asher, okay, there is a person who makes himself wealthy, which means that some cases are like this. Yeah, so the point he's making here is, I'll express the way Rabbi Moskowitz would always express it, is that like Mishlei is a book of probability. Okay, this is not like a halachic statement or a book of physics or a book of math where any statement that is made in absolute terms is intended to be absolute. Mishlei is saying things that are probable. Okay, and because it's a practical book of advice, so then you need to weigh each piece of advice in terms of its subject matter. So, for example, if I say, if I say like, if you respond to a junk mail from a Nigerian prince, then you're going to get scammed. That's probably very highly likely. Okay. If I say like, if you swim with sharks, you'll get bitten. So maybe that's not highly likely, but the consequences are so drastic that it's formulated as a general principle. Okay. So the point I'm trying to bring out from here, which relates to that last question, is anytime Mishlei makes a general statement, that doesn't mean it's true all the time. There might be an actual limit, or it might be probable, or there might be qualifications, but the proverbial style is to state it generally, and it's up to us to figure out, is it true in every case, or are there limitations, or is it probability, or are there conditions? So that's the same thing. Someone says lo yo'ilu otos resha, that could mean they're never beneficial. It could mean that they are most of the time not beneficial. It could also mean that like sometimes they're not beneficial and sometimes they are, or it could mean like on a rare case they're not beneficial. Same thing with the second half, tzedakah tati mimavis. We might as well ask that question here also. Okay, is in did we ask that already? No. In what sense does tzedakah save from death? And then this doesn't seem to be true. And I think the first time I ever learned this pasuk when I was 16 or 17 with Rabbi Moskowitz, I remember very distinctly. He said, I think someone in the class must have argued that like, no, but tzedakah is a big zechus. And I think Rabbi Moskowitz says something like, if I give tzedakah at the mouth of a volcano that's erupting, then is it going to save me from death? So like, it doesn't seem to be, strictly speaking, all true. But again, we have to define it. Okay. So let's
arguably, we need to know what kind of death it's referring to. Yeah,
right. But again, our approach in Mishlei is to raise every question no matter what, and then give interpretations. And so that might be a problem interpretation, but we don't want to jump to immediately assuming that death is not literal, because we might miss a question or an avenue of thought. So we'll list this here, and then once we're done with the questions, we'll go to approaches.
May I ask another question?
Yes, please do.
What do we mean by mavis here?
Yes. Okay, good. And what is meant by mavis? Right. So that was what Shmuel just said now, is that maybe death does not mean like literal death. And we see, look, the Targum gave us an opening by calling it a bad death. It does not mean all death. Okay. So he's not answering it, but he is giving us an opening.
What's the bad death?
Yeah. And what would be the bad death? Yeah, bad death. Yeah.
I thought all deaths are pretty bad.
Yeah. But I think there are some that are worse. So they say.
It's true.
Yeah. Okay. What are the other questions we have to ask? Either particular questions or general Mishlei questions.
Maybe this is addressed in the lo yu'ilu, but generally, when you talk about benefits, you have to think about to whom or to a specific. There's always a beneficiary of something.
Yeah.
It's zero. Certainly in zero-sum games or situations like that. Right. It's a little weird to just say without even hinting or even alluding or qualifying it in any way.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I'm going to just tack that on to question 4, which is you need to define the value system by which benefit is measured and who the would-be beneficiary is. And I think when Leah translated the pasuk initially, she said the treasure houses of the wicked don't benefit them, and I think that's like the implication. But we do have to keep an open mind that it might be some other party. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we could also take that one step further and transfer it to tzedakah. Like maybe it doesn't save the person who gives tzedakah from death, but it could save somebody else from
Okay,
death.
fair question. Fair question. All right. So whom does it save? Good.
I mean, shouldn't I have also written if we want to? I don't know. Maybe tell me in terms of the asymmetry thing. Shouldn't it also say treasuries of wickedness will not benefit life? You know, if you want to really contrast.
Oh, okay, good. So that might be a road to actually answering it, which is that that it's the opposite benefit that's described here. Like in whatever sense tzedakah is saving from death, then the treasuries of the wicked will not benefit you in that way. So that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, I'm not going to list that as a new question, but I think that is a possible approach to an answer.
Oh, that you're saying that's the approach to an answer, not a question?
I mean, I think it's subsumed under the questions we've already listed. So that's why I'm not listing it as a separate thing. But it's like a step in towards an answer, like inferring. And again, look, methodology, this is a good move, is like you want to have as conservative of an interpretation as possible of like getting hints from the other parts of the pasuk to figure out to the answers to your questions and like speculating as little as possible. Okay, I'm going to ask the questions we ask on every pasuk here. Okay, just until we get into the habit of asking these. Okay, which is, who is the audience of this pasuk? Okay, seems to be anyone because it's not saying a second. It's not saying a specific person for the second half, but we do know that different pasukim either have specific audiences in mind or have different ideas for depending on which audience you're talking to. Like I think last time we talked about how Mishlei is for the Pesi, the Navon, and the Chacham at least, and so like maybe there are different ideas there. What is the practical application of this pasuk? Which means that if we can't translate this into practical terms, then we haven't finished learning the idea. Again, if you translate tzedakah as charity, so then somehow this is going to culminate in the action of charity. But if you say it culminates in righteousness, it's a little bit more general. So we have to like define what is it that we're supposed to do with this pasuk, or if it is the same thing for the first half. And then what is the subject of this pasuk? Sometimes pasukim look like they're about something, and then when you learn them, then the idea ends up being about something else. Like for example, we did one in my morning Mishlei shiur that said gam misrape b'melachto ahu lebal mashchis, that even someone who is lax in his work is a brother to the master of destruction. And on the surface, we thought that the subject of the pasuk was laziness, but then after we learned it, we realized that the subject of the pasuk was rationalization, and laziness was only an example that it gave. So you can't just like look at the words and infer the subject. You have to like look at the idea and infer the subject after you're done with the defining the idea. Okay. So we can always add questions later, but I think we're almost at the halfway point. So this is a good time to start working on the pasuk here. Okay. If you don't mind, since we're all using screens, I'm gonna try to fit this all on the screen. Okay. Anyone want to propose answers to individual questions or try to explain the idea as a whole?
Yeah, before anything, what do you mean by the last question? What is the subject of this pasuk?
Yeah, what I mean is that every pasuk, both conceptually and practically, you should be able to define what it's about. Like, what is this pasuk about? Meaning, what area of decision making does it pertain to, or like, what is the theme, or what is the heading or the classification? And it's not. Look, this is something that I don't think is necessary to ask, but Rabbi Moskowitz was always in the habit of forcing us to answer this, even when I told him this is not necessary. You're just like forcing this because you think it's the methodology, and like you're just doing it. But on the whole, I will concede to him that like it was beneficial to ask the question, because sometimes it just pushes you one step further in clarity in the idea. So I've begrudgingly taken that on as part of my methodology. Kind of like, I'll give you an analogy that maybe you can relate to based on experience and other learning. Kind of like when you're learning the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, and presuming that you're using good editions of the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam divided his halachos conceptually, So sometimes, like, if you ask yourself, well, why did he include these two seemingly unrelated things in one halacha? And you say, what's the unifying subject? And that gives you further insight into how to learn those things, and how to understand them. So same thing in Mishlei, same thing in any thinker. Or any thinker who's writing, and editing it. Okay, what do you guys say? Answers to particular questions. What questions do you think we should start with?
Sorry. Can I just make a suggestion or
sure.
Take a stab at it?
Yeah.
So it's interesting is that it pointing out to wealth, really, right? Otros versus actually just the currency itself.
Yeah.
So it seems like it's referring to like almost like the security and the fantasy of what wealth can provide someone, and basically someone then going about it through, let's say, improper ways through rishos, but there is no security there. But in contrast, righteousness and perfection are the things that actually can give you some form of security, because they can save your life. You can mostly avoid most of the bad that you bring upon ourselves and truly actually have some security.
Okay, so first point you're saying is that we're talking about you kind of, this is kind of implicit in what you're saying, is that you're saying that you're not just talking about money per se, you're talking about like wealth, which is like a certain quantity, and so that is alluded to in Otros. Okay. Second thing is you're saying it's talking about security. Now I see I'm just gonna make sure I understand what you're saying here. It says it won't benefit you. It doesn't say it won't provide security. Are you getting the security from the second half? And like you're saying that like the fact that it's talking about death, and death is something that is like the ultimate insecurity that we're worried about, then you're saying that that's the type of benefit that the wealth won't provide? Or are you getting that from just thinking about like the first half on its own?
It's really both. It's the totality of it. It's the fact that it's pointing to some storage of money, not just money itself, right?
Yeah.
And that in general, wealth, I mean, when you mention wealth and man's relationship to it, I mean, one of the main things is man wants wealth because they want to feel safe. They fantasize that that is what we all seek in a sense, or want it, or on a basic level or a primitive level. And then, on the flip side, raising the notion of protecting yourself from death, that sounds like, the ultimate fantasy of security, or the ultimate security one would want.
Right.
So that's why.
Okay. All right, good. So I definitely see where you're getting it from in the pasuk now. Just to point out also, I think this does, and I think you are answering Ayala's, I think that was Ayala who asked the question here about Otros. So like, I think the modern equivalent of this would be bank accounts. Okay. So like, if you said, I mean, maybe that's not the best word, but it's not just that this guy has one otsar, it's not like he has just one treasure house. He has many treasuries, so we're talking like extreme amounts of wealth here. We're not talking about like you can take care of your needs. We're talking about like beyond the practical. So I think that is something. Now the questions remaining on your approach, I think, are, first of all, what are the treasuries of the wicked? Meaning, what sounds like you're saying is true for anybody, that tremendous amounts of wealth will not provide security that you think it's going to provide. So why does it specify the treasuries of the wicked, and like what is the definition of that? That's the primary question. And then also, how does tzedakah, either as righteousness or charity, save you from death? I think those two need to be clarified.
Do you want me to venture an answer, or?
Yeah, whatever you want. I mean, if you
I don't want. I don't want to be like, but tzedakah and from death was because righteousness. Again, I think I answered before, was the more perfected someone is, the more they avoid the ra that they bring upon themselves, which is interesting. That was alluded to before of topara, right, with bisha.
Right.
But basically, the badness. That's what it means by a bad death. The type of the harm, or literally death, that a person inflicts upon himself because of their lack of perfection.
Okay.
Which is, as the Rambam says, or at least according to the Rambam, most ra and most bad that people bring, the habits that people self-inflicted in one form or another. And what was the first question?
First question is, why is this specifying wickedness? Why not just treasuries will not benefit you? Like, you can't get security from extreme amounts of wealth. That doesn't seem to be specific to wickedness.
That's true. That's a fair question. I'm not sure it really is accounted for.
Okay, so
But
think
I
about it
think
and
it's true,
we'll see. So if anyone else wants to either propose an answer to any of those two questions, or if you have another approach, then we'll take it. And we can I think we have the time this time to like explore different approaches to the pasuk.
I'm going to go out on a limb here
Yeah.
and say that the audience of this pasuk might only be Rishaim.
Interesting. What makes you
It
say
says, Lo yalu otros rasha, that your storehouses of evil will not benefit. But charity, or giving it away, I guess, will save you from death, or in this case, from bad death.
Yeah. Okay, so just make sure we're clear on one linguistic point here, and this is not refuting what you say. Just note that it's not otros rasha, not the treasures of a wicked person, but treasuries of wickedness. I wasn't sure what I heard you say.
Yeah, treasuries of wickedness, because that's the same thing that you'd be giving away in tzedakah.
Okay, are you defining what treasuries of wickedness are?
It refers to things that are done that are wicked, I guess, or wicked merits.
So you're not talking about, are you talking about money, or you're not talking about money anymore?
It's not about money.
You're not about money. Okay, so do me a favor, okay? And this is something which we also haven't talked about in this particular shiur yet, is one of the hallmarks of our approach to Mishlei is, okay, look, there are approaches to Mishlei which are very quick to go to metaphor, and you can get good stuff out of those approaches. But the approach that we take is we take every pasuk as literally as possible until we're forced to take it as non-literal. And since I guess Otsar means a place where you hold wealth, then let's try to assume that it's talking about literal money for now. And then if we have time afterwards, we'll extend it to like a figurative thing. Now, actually, and I'll tell you though, there is a basis in this case to saying it the way you want to say it, because if tzedakah means righteousness, so then maybe the first half is talking about wickedness, and it's talking about just a lot of amount of wickedness. I just think that Otsar does point to like a place where you hold money. So I'm not saying
then it means you aren't exactly learning anything new out of this. I mean, everybody
Well,
knows that doing something bad.
I don't want to just say that there's no way to learn anything new out of this. let's give it some time.
How do we know that it's Resha and not Russia if there's no Nakuda?
I rely on the Dikduk people. I rely on I feel like someone would have said it. Usually, so you've got your go-to guys. Okay, so you've got the Meiri will sometimes point out if there's variant Nikudos readings. The Minchas she, right? He's the one who does talk about that stuff. And I have to admit, I don't usually look at him unless someone points me there, but he doesn't say. And then I also use one of the translations I quote, Robert Alter. He even goes so far as to mention like the non-halachic sources of the text. Like this morning we had a thing where like the word that we had in, according to the what do you call them? Masoretes, whatever you say in English. So like it read it mosquito, and he used the Septuagint and other ancient versions to like say that it's different. So I just trust at face value until someone brings it up. So I'm fairly confident this is Resha.
Okay, but the source is not. If you look at the pasuk, you're just relying on the fact that Nikudot, or otherwise, if there was an ambiguity, you would just look at the Rishonim, basically.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to get it from the words themselves or from the grammar.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, anyone else want to take either answering Donnie's the questions on Donnie's approach, which were why if this pasuk is just saying that if you take security and wealth and try to get benefits from it that it can't give you, so then it's not going to help you. Whereas if you use your money for perfection, which is saying what tzedakah was, then that'll save you from death, because the actions that you're doing and the way that you're living and the way that you're thinking about stuff is going to prevent forms of harm that are brought upon for yourself. So the question I asked on him on that approach was, why would this be limited to treasuries of wickedness? Why wouldn't it just be treasuries per se?
I guess because people go through so much fear once they have this treasury that they're going to lose it. It just naturally leads them to doing bad things about it. or for it.
So that's interesting. Okay, good. So this is actually adding another possibility for otros resha. Okay, I said here, what are otros resha? Is referring to money that was acquired through wickedness, or is it a figurative description of a quantity of wickedness itself, or something else? So I'm actually going to add in here another literal meaning. Is it money that was acquired through wickedness, or is it money which is used for wickedness? Okay. Yeah. So money that's used for wickedness is a much cleaner parallel to tzedakah, meaning charity, and then you can start talking. So now this shifts the question, which is, if it's money that's used for wickedness, so then what benefit are they trying to get from it? And then what benefit are they actually not getting from it? That's like the narrowness of that, I think, is an advantage to us, because it gives us an avenue to find an answer for.
Can you say
Is
that?
there another option?
Hold on, I think I heard Naomi.
Oh yeah, okay. I was wondering if you guys could hear me, but you can go ahead first. I'll hold my question.
Just another option for translating otros resha is maybe wealth that is related to in a wicked way. Like if you relate to your
yes, true.
You acquired them in a straight way. You didn't use it for anything bad, but you just are relating to it in the wrong way.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah. I think the only difficulty with that, which is not an intrinsic difficulty here, is it's I don't know exhaustively if this is the case, but I feel like many times being described as a rasha has to do with how you relate to other people or how you relate to God. Relating to your wealth as a rasha, I'm not dismissing it. I just wonder. I don't know. It strikes me as weird, but logically it's a possibility. So I think it's worth exploring. Okay. In an effort to, we went 15 minutes overtime last time because we got involved in a lot of methodology discussions. Let me show you one move. And this is a move that I think is good, but I don't know if it answers all the questions. Okay. And we'll see if we can answer all the questions by this. Okay. So I'm going to take the approach of tzedakah. Okay. Because it seems like a lot of the Mefarshim do say tzedakah. Okay. So let me set this up. If you ask the average Jew, how much tzedakah do you have to give? What is the average Jew going to say?
10%.
10%, right? Okay. But that's not midoraisa. Midoraisa, how much do you have to give? This is something a lot of people don't know because we don't actually do this very often.
Whatever the Aniyim need.
Whatever the Aniyim need. Okay, good. So let's look at the halakha here. And this is another point here, which is maybe we're going to devote a whole session to this at some point, but the Shlomo Melech, according to the Midrash, wrote Mishlei because people were having a hard time properly relating to words of Torah and accessing the Torah in the proper way. Whatever that means, they give different mashalim for it. So in a sense, Mishlei can be used as a commentary on the Torah, specifically on the Mishpatim. You don't really have chukim in the Torah. So if you go to the Rambam in Hilchos Zra'im, and then you go to Hilchos Matnos Aniyim, which is about tzedakah, and then you go to Perek Shvi'i, which is the mitzvah of tzedakah. So let's just read a few halachos here just to get our bearings. Mitzvah to say litain tzedakah la'aniya Yisrael kfi ma sheroy la'ani. It is a positive mitzvah to give tzedakah to the poor Jews according to what is proper for the poor person. Im ha'isa yad hanosin maseges, if you have the ability to do so. Shnemar pasuk tiftach lo es yadcha lo. You should certainly open your hand for him. V'nemar, and it also says v'hechazakta bo ger v'soshav v'chayimach. I forgot what v'hechazakta means. I don't know. You should strengthen him, the resident and the dweller, and he shall live with you. And your brother will live with you. Okay, fine. Anyone who sees a poor person and hides his eyes and doesn't give him tzedakah, it violates a negative commandment. As it says, don't harden your heart, strengthen your heart, and don't clench your hand from your brother or the poor person. All right, now here's what he says, the specifics. According to what the poor person is lacking, you are commanded to give him. If he doesn't have a garment, then you clothe him. If he doesn't have furniture, konin lo clay bias, then you buy for him furniture. Lo isha, if he's not married, masin lo isha, then you provide him a wife. I don't think it literally means like you make him do kedushin against his will, but you help him get married. V'im haisa isha, and if it's a woman who's poor, masin osa laish, then you marry her to a man. Afilu haya. Now this is the famous halacha. Afilu haya darcho shel zeh ha'ani lirkov ahasus ve'eved ratz lefanav. Even if it was the manner of this poor person to ride on a horse and have a servant run in front of him, so he's like a opulent, Haman type scenario here. V'ha'ani. And then he became poor and he lost all of his property. Konin lo sus lirkov alav. Then you buy him a horse to ride upon, the eved larus lefanav, and a servant to run before him. Shneimar de machzoro asher yachzar lo. So that's the pasuk. Enough to meet his lack, which he is lacking. Umitzuva ata lahashlim chesrono, ve'ena tamitzuva la'ashro. Okay, so you are obligated to fulfill his deficiency. You are not obligated to enrich him, meaning to make him richer than he was before. So that's something obviously is very different than our American view of charity. We think of charity as like providing someone's basic needs or getting them back on their feet, but halacha views it as any lack, and it's not just a physical lack. It's also a psychological lack based on his lifestyle, the standard of living that he had. So, okay, so that's my piece. Okay, so that's the piece of the puzzle here. Okay, so maybe should I give you another piece? Let's see. Should I give you another piece now? Yeah.
Are you referring to storehouses as being miserly?
I do think it is being miserly, yes, because if you translate tzedakah as charity, then I think the storehouses means a guy who has a ton of money and he's just holding it to himself and not giving tzedakah, okay? And we'll talk about that in a second. I also want to give you one more piece here, okay? So this is the Meiri, okay? A lot of Mefarshim, shockingly, don't explain what it means that it'll save you from death, okay? Or they explain it in ways that are like, I don't find convincing. Okay, for example, like I'll just give you one example that I didn't find convincing here. The Radak says, who's very good on Mishlei, again, there's not a knock on the Radak. Al tirte laharbos osher beresha uvachamas. Don't desire to increase your wealth through wickedness and violence or robbery. Because your wealth will not benefit you at the time of your catastrophe. Because it was acquired through injustice and evil. Because when they penalize you in front of the government official and they interrogate you, yadunu alecha lamus, they will condemn you to death, v'lo yikablu mimacha kofer, and they will not accept a ransom from you. Now, the reason why I don't, maybe that was a lot more common back then. I just think that that's way too specific. I know where he's getting it from, right? Because he's trying to say that it's going to save you from death. So what scenario is it that you're going to be put to death? Well, you got a death penalty. And like, what scenario will a lot of money not save you is if you can't buy off the government, Okay, fine. I don't buy it so much. But here's another one. Misha is also in the Radak. Misha kana osher b'tzedakah v'yaseh mimeno tzedakah. Oh, it's part of the same one. Sorry. Someone who acquires wealth through tzedakah or with righteousness and does tzedakah from it. So he kind of hedges and says both. Yinato mi misa meshuno. He'll be saved from an abnormal death. Says who? How? I don't know. And a lot of the Mefarshim just don't explain. But the best explanation I found is the Meiri. Okay, and let me make this as big as I can make it. At a certain point, so this is the only place currently where the Meiri is available online, which is mgketer.org. So if you need a Meiri, okay, see, you lost it there. Okay, so here's what he says. And this is a key methodological point in learning any pasuk that has to do with death. Okay, so he says like this: Lo ye'ila otros resha u'tzedakah tatim imaves kara otros resha kish enu mistapik mehem l'tzedakah. So that's what Shmuel was saying just now. Is what is an otros resha? It's when you don't use it for tzedakah. Okay, so interestingly, so he's not saying it was acquired through wickedness. He's saying if you have a lot of money and you're not using it for tzedakah, then that makes it wicked. V'amar she'Hashem ya'anishehu v'lo yu'ilu lo. It says that God will punish him and will not benefit him. They won't benefit him. Aval b'shiva drachim yanusu mimenu. But in 7 ways it will flee from you. That's just borrowing a phrase from Dvarim, from the Tokhacha, from the Kisavo, I think. Aval kishiyas mem tzedakah kamisas yada. But when you do tzedakah according to your ability, Hashem yamidehu biado, then God will preserve it in your hand. Va'af ki sikra v'yad hamuhumos alav. Even when you get like opposition, I don't know exactly how to translate Yahumus, hands that deal blows. Tane botid kaso, then your righteousness will answer you, meaning it'll testify for you. V'yatzilenu mikama mikrim umikama sibos. Okay, and it will save you from many chance occurrences and many causes. Hain mavis, hain shar sibos, whether death or other bad causes. Ki hamaves hu klal l'chol mini hatsaros, because death, I guess, I don't know if he's talking in Mishlei or in Tanakh in general, death is a generic term for all types of afflictions. As we explained in our chibur, which is the chibur hatshuva, which I didn't find it because I don't know. Actually, I forgot to search. I don't know if it's available online. And you will be saved from some of them or all of them in accordance with God's will. Because of people's love for you, or because of God's reward. Okay, so that's his explanation for the pasuk. So let me just summarize that, and then let's go back to our pasuk. He's saying, number one, Otros Resha means that you have a lot of money, but you don't give tzedakah. That's the threshold for Otros Resha here. So you didn't acquire it through wickedness. It's not like you're using it to actively harm people. You're just not giving tzedakah. Secondly, he did is he says tzedakah means that you give charity. Third thing he says is that it will save you from many afflictions, okay, many kinds of afflictions and a lot of them, and some through natural means, like he says, people will help you, people will like you, and some through God, which implies hashgacha, and death does not mean specifically death. Okay, so I ask you now, based on the Rambam's definition of tzedakah and the the Meiri, can we explain at least the second half or the entire pasuk? Now, Shmuel, I happen to see that you're raising your hand. I can't see people raising their hand in general, so feel free to just interrupt. Okay, go ahead.
So I just noticed the connection between the Meiri and the Radak. They're both talking about a socio-political sort of idea of if you give tzedakah, then I guess other people are more likely to like you, because they're less likely to go and I guess steal from a philanthropist if they're going to be getting their money anyways. If they're robbers or like if they're a part of the government, they're like, yeah, that guy's a nice guy.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, he definitely is in that framework. I think there are probably several explanations you can give for why people like philanthropists, because I don't even think it needs to be like, in other words, we're not talking, I don't even know if philanthropist is the best term, because philanthropist to me means like you have a lot of money and you're giving a lot of it away. It sounds like even just generosity, just a generous person is someone who people will like. And it doesn't necessarily there are people who like, you just know that they're very giving people and they're not giving a lot, but like, you know that they're like that. And when they're in a situation where they need help, then you'll help them out, like, cause you know, either because they've helped you or you know that they're a nice person. Okay. So can anyone on a venture to explain the pasuk based on the halacha we read and the Meiri, or not all the pasuk, but even answering any of the questions here.
So I guess to start with, tzedek/tzedakah is tzedakah in this case. Yeah. It's referring to charity. Right.
Although even though it is referring to charity, I think that it's also indirectly referring to tzedek because you're gaining tzedek through doing tzedakah. So it almost doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be doing tzedakah. So I guess it does matter that it is talking about like giving charity. But I think the concept of tzedek is still relevant. Yeah. Okay, good. So how does it save you from death? That's the part we have to piece it together now.
Well, according to Meiri, death is just trouble in this case.
Right. So how's it going to do that? Because he gave a couple examples, and we gave our example of the people will like you or God will reward you. I think there's actually a different meaning that you can go to based on the mitzvah of tzedakah d'oraisa.
You could maybe be saving the recipient from death.
The recipient. Oh, that's also true. Yeah, that's okay. Good. That's actually that's right in front of right in front of my nose. I never actually thought about that. Right. So then, though, the problem, or not the problem, the question is, what is the first half saying? Is that also talking about the recipient? So that's a good standalone thing for the second half.
Maybe it's saying that when you're poor, they will help you according to your needs as well.
Okay, that's also true, right? So when you're close to death of starvation or whatever, then they can help you. Okay, so let me tell you what I'm thinking. Okay, and you tell me if this is if it makes sense or not. And I'm not going to try to interpret the first half quite yet. Let's just focus on the second half. So, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah, okay, one of the things you have to do is you have to be able to assess what someone needs. All right, so you have to be able to assess not just physically what they need, but what their socioeconomic standing is, and psychologically what they need. Okay, and if you think about this in particular, like, it's easy to say, like, if he needs clothing, then you clothe him, and if he needs, to get married, then you help him get married. It's not so simple in practice. Like okay, I only know this. This is not for my own righteousness. I have a friend, a non-Jewish friend, who lives in Portland, and he's a Christian guy, and his whole life is like helping homeless people, So I see a lot of what he posts about, like, helping homeless people, and a lot of what he posts about is like things that people think are helpful and like are not actually helpful. And so, like, there are ways to, like, give I should have taken examples of this ahead of time, but let's say, like, when you give I'll just make up an example here. Oh yeah, one example he gave is, he says, like, if you give people will donate like backpacks with holes in it or stains on it, and like they think, well, it's better than nothing, but like it's not necessarily better than nothing, because, like, let's say you have a poor person who goes and like gets a backpack, and like the person who's giving it didn't know that there's a hole, or like, and then he realized there's a hole there, and like it doesn't work, like it doesn't fulfill the purpose at all, and then it's wasted, or like, let's say, there's a stain, and like part of the thing he's trying to do is to like get a job or whatever, and like he needs this to go to work, and like that's bad, and that's certainly not meeting the psychological needs. Like, you can argue about whether it's good or not. So the point is that, like, to truly give tzedakah, or let's say, like, with the giving food thing, right? So there are, halacha talks about this. There are degrading ways to give tzedakah, like throwing it in their face, and and then there are ways that take into account the person's psyche, where, like, doing it in private, or like you have these scenarios set up where, like, I've heard, like, in Far Rockaway, I always forget what the names are of these places, but the people who basically set up like a bodega, basically like a grocery store that's set up like a grocery store, and like poor people can come in and just take what they need, but they can actually like have the dignity of shopping in private, picking stuff out, as opposed to just being like given food, so like that's taking into account their psyche. So the more you practice tzedakah d'oraisa, the more you become adept at evaluating what people need physically and psychologically, and the more you become familiar with what human needs really are. Like, if you live in this bubble of Otzros Resha, and I know we said we weren't going to go there yet, but like, if you live in this bubble where you're never encountering any poor people because you don't give tzedakah, so you're going to have a very, very skewed perspective of like what is actually a necessity physically or even psychologically. Like, look, just because something makes you feel psychological pain, I don't think halacha would say that like you have to cater to someone's every psychological whim. Like, if a person, like, I mean, maybe this is up for debate, but like I don't think, like, when it says like he had a servant run before him and he was on a horse, that's like a common like that is a socioeconomic level. But if the person like bathed in gold every night, I don't think you're halakhically obligated to like give them gold, on that level. Maybe I'm wrong, but like there, so the more you become familiar with people and their needs physically and psychologically, the more you become attuned to what people actually do need, and what are real needs, and like what are fake needs, and like how to assess them. So what effect is that going to have on your own life?
You'll be better at assessing your own needs.
You will be better at assessing your own needs and knowing how to spend money in ways that actually enrich your life and prevent you from having harm. You will not be one of these people who just maxes out their credit card and then can't pay like their debts, or like doesn't have enough food, or can't send their kids to you're not gonna be one of these not be one of these families who like can't afford to pay for the kids' Jewish education because they go to Pesach hotel. Like that's a messing up of priorities. So the thing is if we're taking the Meiri's thing that death here is just an example of like a really, really bad thing, but death really includes all types of tzara. So I think, and this is kind of in line with what Donnie was saying, is that the more adept you become at practicing tzedakah with others, the more realistically you'll relate to your own money in terms of using this to benefit your actual needs and to take care of what you actually like, what is actually good for you, and to avoid what's actually bad for you. And the contrary is what's going to happen to the Russia who is removed from the realm of tzedakah and just storing tons and tons of money that he's not using for righteous purposes. So how's he going to relate to money? Chances are
he's going to spend his last couple of dollars to go and get in his final bath of gold before he dies.
Yes, right. That's true. Right. So to translate then in more universal terms, chances are he is going to be seeking benefits that actually don't benefit him or maybe even harm him. He's going to be relating to money in a very fantastical way, and be so caught up in so far removed from what his actual needs are that he's going to not gain the benefit that he's seeking from his money. I mean, the long answer to this question is read all of Sefer Koheles, because Sefer Koheles is filled with examples where the Rishonim are trying to get stuff out of their money that they can't actually get. But like the examples are all around you where people have tons of money and are very, very unhappy because the things that they think they need, or things that they strive to buy with their money are not actually what they need, or they're going about it in a dumb way. Whenever I teach this in high school, I show them this, or I think it's this pasuk, I show them this clip. This is an old YouTube clip. I believe it's a clip from, I would show it to you, but it always messes up when you do video on Zoom. I think it's a clip from 2006 or 2007. Okay. When YouTube was first in its infancy. If you look up, let me, hold on just one second. You got to see this clip. I just got to look it up, the name. Hold on a second. Just one second. Trust me, it's worth it. Yeah, 13 years ago. That was 2007, right? So if you look up "spoiled girl gets her car," okay, or something like that, you'll find her name is Mackenzie, okay, and her dad buys her a luxury car. And she starts, this is like a teenage, like a 17-year-old. She starts crying and whining because it's the wrong color. And her younger brother's like filming her and like embarrassing her. But it's a good example of like, how like, you got your needs so messed up that your dad gives you a sports car and like you start crying and whining. There are a lot of examples of this. So that's my shot of the pasuk here. So to summarize, and then I'll take questions on it or other interpretations. So the subject of the pasuk is how tzedakah, the mitzvah of tzedakah, will actually cause you. Thank you for posting that in the link there if you want to see it. The mitzvah of tzedakah will actually change the way you relate to money and result in either unhappiness or happiness. Okay. And when I say happiness, I'm not meaning in the philosophical sense. I mean like avoiding things that are painful and like getting things that are good. How does tzedakah do that? Because in order to do the mitzvah of tzedakah, you have to be evaluating people's physical and psychological needs. And the more you engage in that, the better, more realistically you'll spend your own money and have a better sense of what your own needs. And also the value of money, like what money can get and what the relationship is between expenditure and like happiness. But if you are refusing to give money and you're just storing up storehouses of money, chances are you're going to be relating to money in a fantasy-based way. And that's going to be where you're going to try to seek happiness. and benefit, and you're not going to get it. And maybe that's why the pasuk is stated in such generic terms here, because it's not talking about a specific type of benefit. It means like the whole type of benefit you're trying to get from money, whether it's like status or like the best stuff or like solving all of your problems, all of these things that people with lots of money are tempted to try to like achieve, they can't get because they're impossible goals because they're rooted in fantasy. So they're just not going to get those things because they can't, these are not things that can be gotten with money.
I have a question on the if minat Torah, it doesn't matter whether the person's need is psychological or real, right, or material. You have to do it. So then, wouldn't that allow you sort of to skirt the distinction? I mean, the mitzvah tzedakah is if someone needs something, you see they need it, they say they need it. Why is it going to train the Baal tzedakah who does it properly to really be able to, make that distinction and then apply it in their own life?
Right. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I guess I was kind of assuming that there is a certain type of assessment that you have to do, like because of the examples the Rambam gave. Like, I don't know if it's always going to be so simple that like the person comes up to you and says, "Hey, man, I need a shirt," So that was one place where my assumption came from, and then another place where my assumption came from is like I said before, like how you do it. Like I'm just thinking like the nitty gritty realities of tzedakah, like don't necessarily like even back. I mean, maybe things were totally different back then. Like I don't know if it's so simple of just like a person telling you exactly what they need and then you give it. Like I think there has to be a certain amount of like assessment on like how do I provide them their needs in the best way, or I only have like $50 to give. What should I give that is the best at providing like their needs? Like, is it all like equal game according to like, if you've got a totally like poor person and they need food and clothing, like does the Torah just say flip a coin, or like, should you like assess like what's the best use of my money for this poor person? I was kind of like assuming that there were all these particulars involved in the Doraisa. I don't know if that's true.
Anyways.
Yeah.
So what's the death exactly? Are you saying that it's the avoidance of miscategorizing your real needs? Like that's
no,
like
I'm saying the death is like actual bad things that happen to you. Not not just death, but but I'm saying that comes from misusing your money and from having a fantasy-based relationship to it. So I'm not saying it is the fantasy-based relationship. I'm saying like stuff that comes from that, like the Rambam gives this example of he gives in the Moreh Nevuchim in 3:10, he gives a lot of examples of like the people who are trying to get tons of money will endanger themselves, overseas to try to like get treasures and stuff, or let's say in the modern world, you have people who will work themselves to death and like cause themselves lots of stress and not have time with their family and like get themselves into all sorts of like sketchy deals and like expose themselves to risk that could like jeopardize like their ability to provide. And like there are lots and lots of things that people can get into from a fantasy-based desire to just accumulate tons of wealth. And all the stuff that Donnie mentioned also of like when you take security in wealth. There's a good shiur called Security and Wealth that like there's a lot of pains and letdowns and conflicts and frustrations that come along with that.
I have a thought about kind of based on what some of Rabbi Moskowitz is teaching.
Sure.
And maybe answers a little bit of what we're trying to answer. So like Rabbi Moskowitz says that Mishlei teaches you how to accept reality. So he's saying that a person can have a lot less, but as long as he has an acceptance of reality, he can be much more happy with it.
Right.
So in the case where I think maybe somebody who accumulates wealth, it's somebody who would never ever be able to handle dealing with anything wrong going with their life. And when you look at and you were saying that, how is it that if you look at the needs and what things that happen to other people, so maybe it opens you up to the idea that just the world is random and anything can, you're not as fragile because, anything can happen to anyone. So you're prepared, with whatever happens to to be able to deal with it. You're not living in
Right.
like a denial that a person living in denial and something happens, that's it, they're shattered.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. Because money is such a because it provides so much utility, then people fall back on this notion that I can just use my money to solve any problem, and so that makes them a huge step removed from actually being able to cope with reality, because they think I could just buy my way out of anything, or I could just like throw money at the problem and solve it. Whereas someone who is relating to reality in the correct, in a practical way, will be much closer to the dealing with the facts on the ground and accepting stuff that happens that is not in line with their will, and et cetera. That is a good insight. All right. So yes.
In addition to charity requiring you to think about a specific person's needs, there's also the aspect of charity where you have to prioritize among different causes and different people. Right. And I think there was an article in Rabbi Hoffman writes the halacha column for the 5 Towns Jewish Times, and he was saying like the causes where you have to save a person's life actually come first. Like if a person's going to starve to death, obviously you have to give them money to save them from death. Right. If a pidyon shvuyim is also like saving a person's life literally. Right. So those kind of, maybe tzedakah tatzil mimaves is because you literally have to prioritize the causes that save people from death.
Yeah. So I obviously the idea is true. I'm a little averse to interpreting the pasuk that way because, first of all, you don't need the pasuk to just tell you a halacha. Like we would still, in other words, even if we interpreted that, we would still have to get a new halacha out of it. A new idea out of it. And secondly, I object to it for the same reason I objected to the Radak, is that to me, for my taste in Mishlei, that's too narrow. Like that it's talking about just that one feature of tzedakah. There are pasukim that talk about specific circumstances, but like I would need a compelling reason to say that this is talking about a specific circumstance. Like in other words, you could say what Tamar said earlier, I think, which is that like, realizing how far reaching your tzedakah can go. Like you hear these stories all the time about how like if someone hadn't gotten like a tzedakah, like tzedakah when they needed it, they would have been like living on the streets, and then they could have died or whatever. But because they got this tzedakah, they were able to like go and get a job and stuff. It's like I'd be okay with an idea like that. Like that tzedakah could.
Maybe I will.
I don't know if someone just talked or if they just unmuted themselves. I'm just going to mute everybody really quickly.
Sorry, unmuted myself.
Okay. What do you call it? Oh, you hear all these stories about how tzedakah had such far-reaching effects that it literally saved someone from death. I'd be okay with an idea like that. We'd have to explain it for the first half, but I'm uncomfortable with keeping it so narrow. I want to end off. We don't have to end the shiur now, by the way. The shiur is officially over. I just wanted to leave one question here. Meiri is like one of the only of my go-to Mefarshim. I think he's the only one of my go-to Mefarshim who said that Otros Resha means you don't give tzedakah with it. Almost everyone else said that it's defined as money that was accumulated through wickedness. And I've found some unsatisfactory interpretations of it, but I haven't found a good interpretation of why does money accumulated through wickedness not benefit you. So if anyone has an interpretation for that, feel free to send it my way. But like I feel like any interpretation that I've seen for that is like a stretch.
Yeah. I think you actually set up the answer for that, is that the person who is committing wickedness to get wealth, right, is already abusing society. He's abusing others. He's basically extricating himself from the society, which the Torah society, where there's a codependence and reliance, which is where tzedakah fits in. So tzedakah, we have a system of this idea of putting away all this wealth as if it'll do anything for you, and not giving tzedakah with it, not supporting others, is basically going to alienate yourself from that and exclude yourself from it, versus participating and getting the tzedakah if and when it were necessary, right. Which is we would be provided.
Yeah. Okay. So you could say that, and maybe this is just my intuition bugging me, but if you're going that far, then just say that at the end of the day, it still comes down to the idea of how they're using their money, right? That they're not using their money for for a purpose that it contributes to the society in a manner of tzedek. Like who cares if you got your money from stealing from people? Like I feel like that that interpretation of like getting it from Gezel and Hamas just doesn't fit the thrust of the idea.
Well, it only has to. That's the audience. It's basically a person who's looking to accumulate wealth.
You're saying that person is going to be involved in these things.
Also, if they're not really discouraging someone from making a lot of money or even necessarily accumulating wealth. They're saying that as you consider it, the option of doing it berishus, essentially, or acquiring through that, is going to be really bad for you. That will end up being a net harm to you. You know, versus the opposite. If you lived a life of tzedakah and didn't worry about accumulating wealth, then the opposite.
Right. Okay. So that's an approach I could take, is like an exact parallel of the second half, but for someone who like engages in rishus to make money, like that is also going to affect the way that you relate to your own needs and your own money. And so keeping it in the same vein, but but focusing on like the harm done to the self through accumulating treasuries through like wickedness. That's going to distort your way that you make decisions about yourself and your needs and your money.
Maybe I was thinking, can you learn that? Well, the Máiri is pretty obvious because it's directly in contrast to the charity and accumulation. So that's like an obvious thing to learn. But the rest of the Mefarshim, can you interpret it as they're teaching you that? Okay, of course, you didn't give tzedakah properly, but then that setting that that's going to cause you to have such a relationship with money that you're going to end up accumulating it through evil means, that you're going to end up stealing or whatever.
I don't know. I don't.
But that's a given. It's a given that you're not going to give tzedakah.
Yeah, that's why I thought Donnie was saying earlier. It's not what he's saying, but that they kind of go hand in hand. Yeah, it's possible. I have to think about that a little bit more. Something bothers me. I can't put my finger on it right now. Someone else? Yeah, Tamar?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the thing that you're saying like doesn't sit right with you, but could you say like kind of like the flip side of part of what the Máiri was saying, that if you destroy your goodwill with other people, then your money's going to help you a lot less. It wouldn't literally not benefit you at all, but
right. Okay, so that's a good idea. Okay, good. So that does work with the Máiri, the way he said it about the goodwill. Yeah, meaning like you got a Bernie Madoff, people are not going to be so willing to help him. Like when you have a reputation of getting your money through wickedness, then people are not going to help you. And if you say, well, maybe people don't know about it. I mean, if you've got otzros that you accumulated through Russia, I think people are going to know about it. I don't, maybe someone can find a case where you had someone who was like a tremendous multimillionaire and people thought he was squeaky clean, nothing wrong. And then people find about like this actual rishos. Like maybe there are cases like that, but certainly a lot of them are in that case. That's a good shot, Tamar.
Also, maybe to add to that is that when these people are going around and they're accumulating their wealth in like a dishonest way, they're constantly in fear of the law because like they could be caught. So there is no benefit because it doesn't bring happiness. It just brings more pain to you because you're worried of the consequences.
Right. So that's an interesting thing because it's a good question. I don't know if this objection is also could be launched against my idea, but like the fact that they have a presence of that they have to worry, in their life, like I don't know if the fact that says it doesn't benefit them. I don't know if just the paranoia and the needing to watch your back would be enough to be able to say it doesn't benefit them. The Godfather has to watch his back, but would he really say that that his wealth didn't benefit him? I'm not saying the measure should be whether he would say it or not, but I feel like the way I'm trying to set it up is like his entire idea of happiness is unachievable. Like that meets the threshold of like it not benefiting him, but yeah, I think it's my objection.
According to like the way you explain the pasuk,
Mhm.
then in the case of like a person who's still giving charity, but they're doing it in a way that is not helping them understand people's psychological needs, like you said with the backpack,
Yeah.
then it would be on the flip side of the pasuk where you would consider it a treasury of wickedness. But isn't that like a really harsh
That's a good
term?
question. So what I would say is that there is a continuum, okay? Meaning like, let's say the person who gives tzedakah in a like, let's say someone who's forced to give tzedakah, you know, against his will, but like he gives it anyway. So he's not getting all the benefits of like assessing people's needs, blah blah blah, but he still is getting the benefit of being forced to realize that the money is not mine, you know, that like God determines how the money goes, you know. So that is a little bit of a benefit that's pushing him towards the correct relationship with money and away from the bad one. He's not ideal, and like he might get a lot of other bad stuff, but I feel like looking at it as a continuum where there's like achieving the true ideal of like embodying tzedek through the midst of tzedakah, where you're like really getting like relating to money in the right way and relating to your fellow human being in the right way, and then there's like more towards the Otros Russia. Like I feel like, for example, you can have a person who acts like the Russia and is not rich. Like you can have a stingy poor person who has the types of harm in the Otros Russia, you know, like, but he just doesn't have the Otros, you know, and he would still be on that side, but just not as you know, as far gone. You know, let's say like a compulsive gambler, you know, who like he's trying to achieve this like fantasy version of happiness and like, you know, and not giving tzedakah, but he's also losing all of his money, so he doesn't have otros, you know. He would still be in the second half, just not as bad as like the really like far gone, really rich guy.
Arguably, this would be ruling out that and would only refer to one quadrant of, I guess, the spectrum. The people who both have the means and the want.
Yeah, you could
to have these otros resha.
Yeah, you could read it.
It's referring to these cunning people, and I guess it's just saying that it doesn't really matter how you gain this wealth, how well you hide your tracks. Death will eventually catch up with you.
Yeah, you could read it as sectioning off that quadrant and you know, stating it in those more absolute terms. I just think you get more mileage, more useful idea mileage out of the pasuk when you read it as a spectrum. All right, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna stay on, but I'm gonna stop the recording and officially end the shiur here because we've already gone over time. And if anyone has questions, I'll just stay as long as there are questions.